Welcome everybody to another episode of Giant Global Graph. This is your host Adrian Krent. And today I finally want to talk about a Visual Studio Code extension we did. And it's a super useful Visual Studio Code extension. That's why I want to show you what we did here. The extension is called SPARQL Notebook. It's done by my colleague Benjamin. And he started actually that as a way because he was fed up with debugging SPARQL queries. He had a lot of stuff going on. He needed to see if the data transformations he did were correct. And for that, he created the initial version of the Notebook plugin. Notebooks in Visual Studio Code is a relatively new thing. You can actually do things which are similar to what you would see in Jupyter Notebooks. It doesn't try to copy Jupyter Notebooks if you ever worked with them. It tries to provide a similar idea and an environment within Visual Studio Code so you can start to mimic the basic concept of Jupyter Notebooks, not necessarily the Jupyter Notebook functionality itself. Benjamin saw this and he decided that he wants to do a SPARQL Notebook, and that's what we're going to play with. In the Visual Studio Marketplace, this is the site of the plugin. The source code is open source. You can contribute there and you can give us feedback if you want to give us some hints or some ideas or even contribute to it. So please check it out. When you want to use it in Visual Studio Code, you go to the extensions, you search for SPARQL, and you choose SPARQL Notebooks. I obviously already installed it, so it's already active on my system. I don't have to do anything anymore. I created an empty project in here, and let's create a new file. And let's save that, and we simply call that readme.sparklebook. So the extension is important. This is what activates the notebook itself. So simply type sparkle.sparklebook as a file extension. And as soon as you start doing that, you start to see that things here change, and it actually says it's a SPARQL notebook. So what's the basic idea? You can do two things in here. You can either create a markdown cell or you can create a code cell, and the code cell is typically SPARQL. Let's start with the markdown cell. So you use the normal markdown formatting, and let's quickly do something here. So this pretty much sums up what you do in here. So you create either markdown or a code cell. In code, use SPARQL syntax. Then you need to either connect to a file, I will show that, or to a SPARQL endpoint when you have some. And then you execute basically the SPARQL query. So this is now the markdown cell. We already did that. So now let's add a code cell. And by the way, you can still edit here. When you are done, you click on this and it gets rendered in the standard markdown render from Visual Studio Code. So you can add a code cell. So you see, you can mix them, you can move them, but right now we just have a code cell. And in here, by default, it selects SPARQL as language, and that's probably what you will do in here. So you can write any SPARQL query. And when you have some other SPARQL language server for highlighting installed, it will properly highlight the SPARQL query. So we don't do that. You do have to install another extension for that. So let's do just a basic select pattern. So it already starts to extend that. I think that's actually another extension, but something for another time. And you see Visual Studio Code, or actually CodePilot, the ChatGPT extension or the Copilot extension, just proposes SPO, which is, as we all know, the most generic SPARQL pattern you can do. And because we don't want to explode the whole thing, we add a limit 10. Let's do that in a new line. So when you now press play, it will execute this cell, but now we quickly need to do a SPARQL configuration. You see this icon here. If you don't see this icon here, it's somewhere down there, so click down there and it will show up. Sometimes it disappears when you don't use it on a regular basis. So in here, you get a kind of a config dialog, and you can say that you want to add another endpoint. Quickly quit that again. So I have existing endpoints. I quickly use one of them. So we add another one later. So this is the Linda's production endpoint. This is from the Swiss government endpoint. I don't have to use a user in here. It's a public available endpoint. So when you see this flash here, it's connected, and I can basically simply click here, and then this query will get executed on the active endpoint in here. Let's quickly try that. It works. I get some result sets back, and as you can see, this is the SPARQL JSON result set. This is not really what I want to have. So I go to change presentation, and I select SPARQL JSON results, and now it starts to render that as a table. You can save that in your preferences. This is all documented in here. We are not going into that detail, so just use that as a basic reference into it. I make it a little bit bigger here, so you can see that we get SPO, I get a table back, and I see all the things in here. Obviously, this is not super interesting, so we quickly do something else. We disconnect this one. For demo purposes, I downloaded ntriple files because this is another very cool feature. In here, we wanted to have some real-world RDF data, and we modeled some basic cast information of the Big Bang Theory, the series. And you can download that as ntriples, and that's what I did. So when you look at that, it's standard ntriples, a few lines of ntriples with basic information about the Big Bang Theory in there. So what I now can do, instead of connecting to the cell we had configured here in a SPARQL Notebook, I can right-click on this file and say SPARQL Notebook use file as store. So what it does right now is it is using a SPARQL implementation in WASM, in WebAssembly, which will load this file into the in-memory store. And now when you execute the query, it will not go to the SPARQL endpoint anymore, which I had. It will go on this local file. So let's validate that. And I need to change the presentation again. So as you can see, this is different data. This is actually part of this data set I just loaded here, the ntriple file we had a look at. And now we can obviously start to do more interesting queries. Let's add another code cell. And let's do something which is a bit more for this data set. So we did have I think we have schema person, and we need the prefix for schema. Can use this service here, so I quickly copy that. Need to add the prefix, otherwise the SPARQL query is not happy. And as you can see, I get the persons back, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 persons. I didn't do a limit, as you can see here, and it didn't explode because that's the amount of persons I have in this file. So this is basically all the magic. You can mix the things, you save it. When you save it, it serializes that into a text file, which you can commit to Git. So it's super, super nice for versioning as well. And then you can basically just execute SPARQL queries and document things and validate whatever you do in, for example, a ntriple file on your disk or a SPARQL endpoint you can reach from your Visual Studio Code installation. That's the only requirement you have. So this can be on your local system. This can be in a company network as long as you can reach it. This can be obviously a public endpoint as the one I defined before. So when you want to add a other SPARQL endpoint, you simply click here, you get guided through the standard Visual Studio Code config dialogues, and you add the public endpoint, the username, the password in case you need one, and that should be it. When you are connected, the query will go there. But if you want a local file, right-click, SPARQL Notebook, use file as store, and you are good to go as well. Now let's quickly take an existing notebook so you see how I document things like that. This is from a project with the Swiss Electricity Commission, it's called. They publish the Swiss pricing for electricity once a year. This is kind of regulated in Switzerland. And in here, I have multiple queries because there are a bunch of RDF data cubes in here. I want to validate that the data is correct. So in case someone tells me there is a problem or something, I can quickly check these queries and run them, and I will get an immediate result if the database is good or not. So I use some documentation and I have some very basic ask queries. SPARQL ask queries give you true or false back. This is very nice if you just want to know, is the thing alive or not, if you don't care about the details, if you don't care about the particular result set. So here I check if this pattern is basically there. This is simply a cube. So when I press that, it returns yes. Let me quickly clear all output. So you will see the results. By the way, this is up here, clear all output. So now all the output is cleared. When I now run it, it executes it. I get yes back. So you also see that it's a nice visual check that everything is in order. I go to the second cell, which is also yes, which I would expect, third cell, and so on. So I know the basic patterns I'm looking for are there. Something else, here you see that it says from file queries and /median Swiss ask. This you can do here when you say add query from file. So instead of writing the query in here and only having it inline in the SPARQL notebook, you can have a separate file. When we go to the file explorer, I should see that here. It's in the docs directory. I have a query subdirectory, and then I see these queries as well. The only thing you should be aware, don't keep them open in two tabs. If you want to edit the query, I think the best thing is to just do that in here. It will then save the query at the right place and you don't have to worry about it. If you start changing it in the separate file, the SPARQL book might get confused and not notice that you updated the file. So let's go back to my notebook. We had some basic validations queries that work perfectly fine. Now we have some queries with limits. So here I really want to see the observations. I quickly play the button here, the query. So now I want to validate some more. I want to get some data back. And for that, I have some queries which actually return me a bunch of rows. So in this query, I just see if I get some standard observations. I select all dimensions from this particular cube and I simply show some of them. I can make this a bit bigger so you see these are all the columns I get back here from this query. That's all fine. It's not super interesting. What I do later is I validate the data. So here we are still in standard stuff. And here I recreated some queries which were previously published as Excel files, so people can get this live from the endpoint. They are also quite big, so I get a hell lot of results back. So always make sure that you have a limit in there, otherwise it can quickly go out of hand. So let's see, this will fetch a whole bunch of data. That was fast. And I rebuilt something which was published as a Excel file before, so people can get that live. This is something we made available for journalists in this case, or the public which wants to do something with the raw data. So if they don't want to use RDF or SPARQL, they can just get back what looks like a CSV or Excel file for them. I have some more of these files, but then I even made some calculations. I check how much the electricity increased in Switzerland, for example. So these are typical queries journalists want to see, and I simply have them in here. So for every new year, it's very easy for me to quickly adjust the numbers. So in this case, and compare the prices from this year, which is 23, with next year pricing, which is 24. These prices were published like 1 month ago. So I can quickly see what is the increase for these tariffs. And that's how it looks like. You get a percentage increase here, and I can copy paste that, give that to journalists, and they can directly search for whatever they want to talk about the pricing. I later did additional validation steps. We figured out that the data delivery had some issues. So there are some things in the data which shouldn't be the case. So I did some validation issues to see if we fix the problems or not. So ideally, this query here should not return anything, but if it returns something, there's most likely a problem. And as you can see, I do get a feedback here. So right now, we indeed still have some data quality issues which they can address. Also, this one, we check which municipalities don't exist anymore, but we get deliveries. This also shouldn't happen. But you get the point. I did these queries so I can always validate that, and I can talk to the data owners and interact with them to fix it. If they ask me, does it look correct? I just execute the queries in this notebook. I think that's pretty much it. Long story short here is this SPARQL book extension is extremely useful if you just want to document some data sets in RDF or do some validation. As you can see, it's very, very simple to do stuff. You save the thing, you commit it to Git, and you can maintain it like any other file on your disk, any other code you maintain. With that, please play around with it, use it, and if you think you need some other features, go to the page. Where were we? We were here. You can go to the extension repository itself, and you can create some issue and give us some feedback. So there's still some ideas open. Not everything can easily be done. This, for example, a tough one. The proxy support probably won't happen in the free version. It's actually really a lot of work to get that to work. If you need that, let us know. But if you don't need proxies, you should be perfectly fine today already. So there are some ideas, some other features we might or might not implement, and play around with it and give us feedback. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.